Is the government heading for a humiliating backbench defeat on benefits?
What does it mean for Keir Starmer's premiership, and how should Kemi Badenoch play the next week? The government is saying to everyone it's not a confidence matter, because if it were, that'd be a real problem for Keir Starmer. But the whips are going around saying, well, think of it as a bit like a confidence matter. This could really damage the government if you support it. And I think the sheer scale of the rebellion is a testament, not just to disagreement over the issue, but also how many backbenchers have decided they don't like the operation in number 10.
Tim, you've just come back from Parliament.
I have, yeah, I'm exhausted. I just ran all the way.
What was Angela Rayner versus Mel Stride like?
I thought both were at the top of their game, actually. Lots of jokes about the fact that Angela's doing this for the second week running. And Mel Stride said in that very panto, end of the pier kind of way, and I'm sure there are many MPs on her side who would like that to be a permanent arrangement.
Yes, exactly. She's more popular than the Prime Minister, which I think we can both agree, actually.
But the political subtext to all of this is, if this welfare rebellion goes ahead, if the government is severely damaged, then Angela Rayner is thought to be the person most likely to benefit because she's the one who really wants the top job, and being vaguely soft left, she might be the person backbenchers turn to.
So when you left the office earlier, you said, or I think there was a news flash saying, oh, hang on a minute, the government might actually pull this bill, let's just give it its full name, the Universal Credit and Personal Independence Payment Bill. They might actually pull it because of this rebellion and how embarrassing it's all looking. So you then hot-footed it to the Commons.
Yes, where people were saying that. There was a mood that it might get pulled. But the question was put directly to her by Mel Stride, and she said...
I don't know if he sort of listened to what I said because I was reading off the script, but what I can tell him, and I don't need the script, we will go ahead on Tuesday.
So there's Angela Rayner confirming that they will put that bill before the Commons. How can it be kibosh then? Can we just work out the electoral maths on this? An amendment has been tabled trying to kill the bill itself.
Yeah, due to be debated on Tuesday. Labour rebels are supporting an amendment which, if it is selected by the Speaker, and in our strange system, the Speaker has a lot of power here and he could choose not to select it. But presuming Lindsay Hoyle recognises the strength of the House and its opinion and he selects it, that amendment would essentially ruin the bill and say it can't go ahead. And it specifically points to lack of consultation with disabled people and their calculation that 250,000 people could be thrown into poverty. So if the amendment is selected, it is predicted that something in the region of 122 Labour MPs might vote for the amendment, and that number is going up all the time. So if you take the government's working majority, which is about around 163, and if you take that down, if you take off the 122, plus if you were to add the independents at 15, or the Lib Dems, who also in this deputy PMQ said they would oppose the bill, and if you then added Tory votes as well, then you very probably could defeat it.
Yes, and what's ironic about all this is that backbenchers on the left, the Corbynistas like Richard Bergen and Rachel Maskell and others, are jumping up and down about this bill, saying it's extremely cruel and it goes too far and all the rest of it. Can we just remind ourselves that the bill for welfare has gone up by 86 billion in the past decade. According to the ONS and others, it will continue to increase over the course of the next Parliament, regardless of what this bill does. And this bill really only, tinkers around the edges. It takes 5 billion off. I mean, we can have a debate about how it's targeting who should lose their benefits. And if it's targeting the disabled, I would suggest there are other places to look for more easy savings. For instance, people claiming PIP payments for mild depression, or even, as we have reported on this newspaper, conditions like autism and ADHD.
Yes. Remember the mistake made with winter fuel allowance, where they should have means tested it, but instead they just tried to kick loads of people off it. The rebels are essentially arguing the same as being done here, rather than a sophisticated approach which involves talking to disabled groups to ask what would actually help them. The government's just trying to stop the growth, although it won't, as you've said. I mean, that's the extraordinary thing.
Quiz question quickly. I just looked this up earlier. How much do you think the welfare bill was in 1985?
Oh, I can't imagine. £5?
12 billion.
12 billion.
So it's now over 300. And to be fair, when we talk about the welfare bill, it is worth pointing out that also includes pensioners' payments.
Yeah.
So it's a massive sum of money. And actually, the amount of money paid in the pound by the highest earners in the country is bigger on benefits and welfare than it is on the NHS.
Right.
So that's how this has spiralled, and we know it's spiralled since COVID. But I'm only making the point that you've got this massive rebellion about a bill that isn't going to make any difference to the benefits bill.
Right. And during PMQs, a couple of MPs were placed to stand up and say, and what about the rise in free school meals? Isn't that great? And this is part of the problem, is that the government didn't argue for welfare cuts on the basis of there's a moral question here of people standing on their own 2 feet and looking after themselves. They didn't actually make a proper philosophical case for it. So on the one hand, it's saying they're going to do some cuts. On the other hand, in order to soften the blow, we're going to raise spending elsewhere. Well, how does that make sense if this is either about people standing on their own 2 feet or it's about saving money? I bumped into and spoke to a chief backbench rebel on Tuesday night.
Was it Sexy Jezza?
I'm not going to say who it was, but they made a couple of interesting points. One is, don't forget that at the same time as the government is cutting welfare, in inverted commas, it's also raising defence spending. And that's something that really gets under the skin of the left. That seems to them like the wrong kind of priorities. They're also complaining that the government just lacks a sense of moral crusade. Remember Harold Wilson, Labour is nothing if it's not a moral crusade. Well, where is this government's crusade? How is the country going to look different and more equal in a few years' time after what it's doing? So they're saying, you're just cutting, you're just trying to save money, it's treasury orthodoxy, etc. And the other thing is, at this point in the government, you know who's going to serve in it. So you're pretty much free now with a majority of this size, knowing that you're never going to enter government as a minister, knowing that you're probably going to lose your seat, because a lot of people are on very small majorities and reform is chomping at the bit. You may as well rebel.
Yes.
The whips are going around telling people this, you've got to look upon this as a confidence motion. I mean, it's interesting, the government is saying to everyone it's not a confidence matter, because if it were, that'd be a real problem for Keir Starmer. But the whips are going around saying, well, think of it as a bit like a confidence matter. This could really damage the government if you support it. And I think the sheer scale of the rebellion is a testament, not just to a disagreement over the issue, but also how many backbenchers have decided they don't like the operation in number 10. They think it's right-wing, it's rude, and it's ignoring talent in order to promote its favourites.
Well, also, they're the people who have to sell this stuff on the doorstep. How on earth would it have gone down in some northern working-class towns on the council estates to say to people who are on 13 grand in pensions payments a year, you're losing your winter fuel allowance?
Yeah.
I mean, imagine having to sell that. But this is interesting from YouGov, isn't it? Just in light of how backbenchers are feeling and why they're so twitchy. Working class voters are abandoning Labour for Reform UK, a major new poll has shown. This is a story on our website. More than half of 2024 Labour voters, that's 52%, who would now back Reform, live in working class households. The poll was of more than 10,000 people, so that is big, and it found that broken or undelivered promises are the main reason for people deserting Sir Keir Starmer's party. Now that's significant because we've had this weird sort of paradox where two major pieces of legislation that weren't in the manifesto, changes to abortion laws and assisted dying, have ended up being ram-raided through Parliament. And then the promises that were made in the manifesto, we will be good to working people, pensioners and others, we will support those with disabilities and health problems, has now been turned on its head.
Yeah, exactly. And again, those MPs who were elected as a one-off and know they're elected as a one-off, they're now looking at the possibility of being defeated by the ultimate class enemy, as they see it, Reform.
Yes.
Yeah, imagine that as an MP. You've just got elected and you're weighing up the possibility that you could lose your seat to Darren Grimes.
But also...
You really could.
No, I know. I'm acutely aware of that. You are right. And that is quite scary. But the other thing, I suppose, is, I mean, I've criticised Nigel Farage from a right-wing perspective for his decision to back Labour, or indeed back the very same backbenchers who are opposing the cuts to benefits. They're also saying they want to scrap the 2-child benefit cap. And from a right-wing perspective, I had argued previously on the Daily Tea, that's just a bit nuts. Reform really should be standing on the side of working class people who think that too many people are claiming benefits. If you have children, that you should be able to bloody well afford it. I'm going out to work every day. I don't agree with people, in inverted commas, taking too much from the state. But then I suppose from this whole I'm going to park my tanks on Labour's lawn perspective, maybe it is quite attractive to people to see Nigel Farage aping these sorts of socialist policies.
I think he's doing it because he believes in it. I'm not being all wide-eyed and idealistic. As he keeps insisting, it doesn't poll well.
Yeah.
Welfare cuts and saving money through the benefits bill polls really well. Reform is taking a position which actually a lot of swing voters probably wouldn't agree with. And I think they're doing it because it's a natalist thing. They think we don't have enough babies in this country, and they think we should skew the welfare system towards encouraging people to have families.
Also, he's trying to make the correlation with this whole kind of very J.D. Vancian faith and family and country.
Yeah.
He's been arguing it from the perspective of we're actually doing this because we want to help working parents.
Yes.
We want to incentivize working parents to have more children, continue working. If there are working parents, then usually they have working children, and that is a good and positive cycle to encourage, rather than encouraging a different cycle, which is parents on benefits, children on benefits, no one being in the workplace. Having said that, I think there is a frustration around none of this legislation doing anything to change that quite horrific situation, which is since COVID, 9 million more people who could work not working.
So much of our policy debates are actually talking about how we clean up after the pandemic and the lockdown.
So Mel strides through Deputy Prime Minister's questions. I would question the wisdom of Kemi Badenoch sitting this one out. I know it's parliamentary convention.
It is, yes.
That if the PM deputises, then the opposition needs to also put in a deputy rather than the actual leader.
Yes.
She did very well on grooming gangs last week. She was like thumping the dispatch box and having a right go at Yvette Cooper. She's trying to make a splash with her suggestion that she will support the bill if it has a series of other amendments in it.
If it gets tougher.
Yes.
Which it's not going to do. Because, of course, if the government were to make it tougher, then the backbench rebellion would grow. So she's demanding something that's not going to happen.
Is this clever politics, or is she being a bit too cute by half?
I think she's playing 3D chess, which is to... so if she were to come out right now and say, I will oppose the bill, then Labour can say, well, you don't have any serious plans for government. So this way she can say she's going to support it if they make these amendments, which they're never going to make, which means that she leaves open the space for her to, at the last minute, to say, and sadly, therefore, we cannot support this bill. So this way she wins both ways. She has looked like she has a credible alternative in a series about welfare, but she can also at the end stick the boot in and help to defeat the government. I kind of agree with you. I would like to have seen her to participate regardless of convention, because I think this is her one opportunity every week to get noticed by the public, and
yes.
I don't think she can walk away from it, although Stride was pretty good.
Well, Stride knows about benefits and welfare because he was at the Department of Work and Pensions before the Tories imploded. The other interesting aspect of this, of all people, I'm doing this series of podcasts with Jeremy Hunt about his new book, which is celebrating all things British and saying that we can take a leading role in the world. And he, of all people, he's considered a wet in the Conservative Party. And certainly as Health Secretary, he never suggested this. Now he's saying that welfare bill should be slashed not by 5 billion, but 50.
Yeah.
And he is arguing, while I was Health Secretary, it was a great thing that we had this parity of esteem between physical and mental health problems. But it created a benefits explosion because people were claiming it for conditions like mild depression.
It was ironically mad.
Well, it was ironically mad. I think if you've got such crushing clinical depression that you can't leave the house and you can't work, I mean, of course, I think that you should be able to claim benefits. If you are literally incapacitated, either physically or mentally, then that is one thing.
Yeah.
But the idea of people claiming for ADHD and autism strikes me as bonkers.
It just seems to me to be similar to food banks. Gosh, this is right-wing. In the sense that the more people went to them and the more we talked about people having to rely on them, the more the numbers seemed to grow. And likewise with mental health, the more that governments talked about how it must be treated seriously, the more people came down with mental health conditions and the more money we had to spend on it. And we couldn't possibly keep up. So if you actually talk to anyone who's trying to access NHS mental health services, they'll always say you can't get an appointment. It's one of the hardest
that's because
things.
we're spending too much money on benefits. I mean,
Right.
This is the alternative argument. Somebody was saying about PIP payments going to alcoholics. My mother was a chronic alcoholic. If a PIP payment went to my mother, she would take it straight down to the off licence and buy booze.
Right.
It might have been better if you were going to pay my mother, God rest her soul, PIP, to say, no, actually, we'll take that money and we'll put it into a treatment programme for you at your local clinic.
Right.
That would have been more valuable.
Yeah, and then we're back to undeserving poor arguments, which is at the very heart of the welfare system. When it was set up in the 1910s, it was limited so that it couldn't go to drunks, so it couldn't go to alcoholics, etc.
You could say
but it was designed to avoid that. And then over time, the argument developed, no, but that's cruel, because those people still can't look after themselves, so you're just going to end up leaving them to starve. But
it takes a brave political leader to turn around to the public and say 50 billion needs to be slashed from the benefits bill.
It does, and then it gives the Tories money to play with. Because
True.
in an era in which we know there is no money, if you can magic 50 billion out of the current spend and say, that's what we're going to use for tax cuts, or that's what we're going to use for infrastructure, etc., then it's quite a clever wheeze.
Final thought, Kemi's absent, lesser spotted Starmer. Where is this man? He's at the NATO summit, to be fair.
Yeah.
Is he studiously avoiding Parliament? I'm getting that impression.
I always like to refer to Angela Rayner as his ambassador to the United Kingdom. It is ridiculous, isn't it? He pretty much avoided the Casey stuff last week. I mean, I get the argument that there are diary clashes and there are certain things he has to do, and okay, G7, NATO, all right, okay. But it is starting to look like he is uncomfortable with speaking to Parliament and uncomfortable with facing the music.
Also, I was at sorry to name drop, but I was at the Independence Party, the July the 4th, slightly early party that was hosted at Winfield House by the US ambassador to the UK. It was all very star-spangled, as you can imagine. And, of course, the talk of the night was Donald Trump dropping the F-bomb.
Oh, yeah.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
What I think was interesting about it is there were righties there and there were some lefties there, and all of them seemed to be embracing the leadership of it all. Now, I'm not advocate. I'm not saying that, if you become sweary, then you're a great leader, but at least it's expressing some emotion and an opinion. And by comparison, you look at Starmer and you think, would you even be able to sort of summon that level of passion about anything that you're doing in your entire political life?
Enough. Yes, and if he did, it would be scripted. This is the thing, is if you script an F-bomb, then I really don't approve of that. You should mind your P's and Q's, you're a statesman, don't do that, kids are listening, etc. If you let one drop because you're just really furious, and you're furious with two states that are winding everyone up right now, Israel and Iran, then that actually indicates to us, it reassures us. I mean, it's odd because you think it sounded like things are blowing up, but actually it reassures me to know that the president is angry with those two and is trying to get them to calm down. I find that kind of display of emotion actually reassuring because it reminds me that there is a human being with an ounce of common sense in charge, whereas the android robotic style that European leaders tends to adopt actually doesn't reassure me because it makes me think, are you actually aware of how high the stakes are in this situation?